Hello everyone, I'm CosmicDreamer. Today we're going to talk about conversations with God. In our previous channel content, we talked about the question of God, such as in the previous video about alien civilization levels, where we mentioned that a level 5 civilization is equivalent to a godly existence. But have we, as a level 0 civilization, ever truly contacted a level 5 civilization? Does God exist in this world, or even in the whole universe? Today's episode is God Appears. Conversations with God is the name of a book. Actually, to be strict, it's not a book, but a series. The author is the well-known American author, Neale Donald Walsch, who is 81 years old this year. He was initially not a writer, but a wanderer, a beggar. At the age of 52, he wrote this book, and shot to fame as a world-renowned writer. The Conversations with God series has sold over 12 million copies worldwide. It is definitely a best-selling book, deeply loved and admired by readers around the world. This book essentially discusses why humans exist, as well as the truth of the world, the universe, and God. But strictly speaking, only half of this book was written by Neale Donald Walsch, and the other half was written by God. That's what makes this book so powerful. Before becoming a published author, Neale Donald Walsch was a homeless beggar, making a living by scavenging from the trash. He was truly the type of beggar who would pick through the garbage to find food. He lived every day in agony when he was a beggar, because before becoming a beggar, he was actually a social elite. In his youth, he had been a radio host, a newspaper reporter, and even started his own company. But then he underwent business failure, severe financial loss, divorce, and in his 40s, he suffered a significant car accident. All these major setbacks in life happened to him. Eventually, he had nothing left and became a beggar, just as he was about to turn 50. He had no clue as to why he had fallen so far. He felt in the dark that a mysterious force was continually hindering his progress, wanting to make him a beggar. According to the devil's claim, bad luck should be a random occurrence because the devil says that luck doesn't exist. Yet, bad luck was not a random occurrence for Neale Donald Walsch. It was certain. No matter what he did, things always tended to develop in the worst possible direction. But there wasn't much danger when he was a beggar. Everything was pretty good. Perhaps if he had chosen to lie flat before he went bankrupt, things might have been different. But he didn't lie flat. He kept struggling, which made things worse. He was actually quite a devout believer. He believed in the existence of God. So he felt that it must be God who was opposing him, playing tricks on him, which is why he lived in pain and anger every day, but could do nothing about it. No matter how hard he tried, it was useless. Eventually, he completely lost a sense of the meaning of life. He didn't know why he should live. Why should he continue to live in such agony every day? At that moment, he saw a pen and paper on the table, and he wrote down his anger in a letter to God. In the letter, he asked, "Why are you torturing me? Why are you opposing me at every turn? Who are you? What do you represent?" He was basically cursing God with all kinds of rhetorical questions. Of course, when he wrote this letter, he only intended to vent his inner anger. He didn't expect God to respond. While he was writing the letter, he suddenly heard a voice from above his right shoulder, approximately the area of his right brain, asking, "Are you just looking to vent your anger, or do you really want to know the answer?" He was startled because there was no one else in the room. Wasn't he a vagabond? How did he have a house? Well, he became a beggar around the age of 50. This lifestyle lasted for about a year. One day, he found a newspaper in the trash can that advertised a job opening. It was for a DJ at a campground, paid $50 a day. At the time, he was so hungry and had nothing to eat. He had been a DJ when he was young, so he decided to apply for the job. Initially, he thought he wouldn't get the job because he had long, unkempt hair and a beard, but he took a bath with the money he got from selling cans and went anyway. Upon arrival, he realized all the DJ candidates had long hair, so his fit right in. The only difference was his older age, and he had no demands regarding the job. As long as they gave him $50, he was willing to do anything for as long as needed. So he smoothly got the job and earned his first $50. He promptly bought some food, went to the laundromat to wash his clothes, and shared the remaining money with other homeless people. Later, he went to a recording studio and made another $50. After half a year of hard work, he earned $1,200 in 1 month and rented a small apartment. One morning around 4 a.m., He woke up feeling extremely sad and depressed. He thought, why am I working so hard and tirelessly, clocking over a dozen hours a day, just to come back from the roadside to this small house? Is this my life? Waking up early and working late into my 50s in this place? Is this my fate? His work kept him busy. If he didn't earn enough money, he'd have to leave the little house, so he had to work hard. After all, it wasn't easy for him to find jobs in his 50s, and he had only got the first one because he wasn't choosy. He felt that this was his life, and he couldn't understand it, feeling extremely frustrated. At this time, he saw the pen and paper on his table, where he wrote his anger towards God, and then he heard the voice. He heard a voice in his right brain area asking, "Are you venting, or do you want to know the answer?" He was startled and wondered if he was suffering from multiple personality disorder or what was happening. There was no one in the room, but he didn't think he had a personality disorder. He could hear the voice clearly as if a person was speaking, but the speaking speed was swift, and the choice of words and intonation were entirely different from his own. A characteristic of multiple personality disorder is discontinuous memory. Each personality has its memory and no continuous memory. But he could carry a conversation with the voice, and he remembers the entire process. So he tried to ask a question, and immediately there was an answer. Afraid the voice would disappear, he started taking notes diligently, thus beginning his dialogue with God. He started the conversation with God at about 4 a.m. that day, and kept it up for 3.5 hours till 8 a.m. To be honest, on the first day, he didn't realize who he was speaking with. He thought he might have woken up too early, or was too depressed, and he was hallucinating because of his poor mood. At 4:20 the next morning, the voice woke him up again, asking if he had any other questions. From then on, a voice would wake him up and chat with him every morning at around 4:15 or 4:20 for a year. He then collated the content of this year's dialogue, forming the 3 books of Conversations with God. All 3 books were extensive and super complex. We tacitly accept that the voice at the time was God, because Neale Donald Walsch believed in God. For those in the audience who may not believe in God, you can understand it as a high-dimensional entity or Akashic records. Even if you think it's some form of intuition or inspiration, that's fine too. What we say according to the devil is that it doesn't matter if God exists or not. What matters is the message that is conveyed. Next, let's talk about what God actually said to him. Through these answers, we can have a clearer understanding of what kind of being God is. Of course, the content of this book is substantial, and we can only share some of the more critical parts. Those who are interested can read the book for themselves. The first vital question, so let's enter the dialogue with a question I had been asking for a very long time. How does God talk, and to whom? When I asked this question, here's the answer I received. God answered, I talk to everyone, all the time. The question is not to whom do I talk, but who listens. God later added, just the vast majority of people cannot hear my voice, but you can. He then asked, why can't others hear you? Why can only I hear you? Am I some sort of special being? God replied, you're not a special being. The reason you can hear is that I'm using your language, and that's why you can hear me. In this place, God has additional explanations. God said that in fact, God will speak to all the people in the world 24 hours a day, but not in our language, which we can't understand. Actually, speaking of which, we will release a video explaining the Akashic records in the future. The Akashic records are like rain, constantly falling on everyone's heads. Here God said, I am talking to all of you all the time, 24 hours a day. Some can hear it, some cannot. Neale Donald Walsch didn't understand what this meant at the time. He asked, could you clarify what you mean by you're always talking to us? God mentioned that there has been a constant misunderstanding, which is thinking that God is an external, objective existence. That's why people want to see God, meet God, and expect God to appear. Also, because you believe God to be external and heavenly, or some kind of existence in the universe, you are desperate to perceive its existence through your senses. People want to see, hear, and touch God. But unfortunately, God is invisible, inaudible, and intangible. Because it does not exist objectively, it is in your body, and therefore you cannot sense it with your senses. All your senses exist to perceive objective things. You can't perceive yourself. Hence, you cannot perceive the existence of God. If God is in our bodies 24/7 talking to us, why don't most people hear him? He stated that although God is always talking to us, in most cases, it's not by our language, but through God's language. The following is God's reply. I also communicate with thought. Thought and feelings are not the same, although they can occur at the same time. In communicating with thought, I often use images and pictures. For this reason, thoughts are more effective than mere words as tools of communication. In addition to feelings and thoughts, I also use the vehicle of experience as a grand communicator. In this case, with Neale Donald Walsch, the communication was made directly through English, which is an extraordinary situation. God has his own language. We can hear this language, but most people do not consider this as a language because God's language is what we call emotion. Typically, God can communicate with us in 4 ways: feelings, thoughts, experiences, and language. The last one, language as we know it, is the least used communication method by God. Because human language is strongly limited, it has insufficient dimensions. Human language is one-dimensional. However, the thoughts and feelings that God wants to express are of high dimensions which can only be conveyed through high-dimensional concepts, such as emotions. The emotions he talks about are not limited to joy, anger, sorrow, and happiness. These are defined by humans and are the emotions we have summed up. In fact, our emotions are very complex, just like a language. God communicates with your heart using this language. Emotion is not just a feeling, but a piece of information. If you cannot understand its meaning, this communication fails. You will then be unable to perceive God's information and cannot download the content in the Akashic records. The second way God communicates with us is called thoughts. These are fragments, pictures, and scenes that occasionally flash through our minds. These are all the information God gives us. Sometimes they are 3D images. If you can't understand their meaning, they might project a scene to you. There are also many drawing contents in the Akashic records. The third method of communication is experience, or memory. All the experiences and memories of your life are actually information that God expresses to you. It conveys information to you through your memory. That is to say, there is a significant meaning to the things you have experienced. This significance is conveyed through this experience, which is why meditation is helpful. God communicates through thoughts, and it's impossible to communicate through language only. Language is used to communicate only when a very important message needs to be conveyed to mankind, and when emotions, thoughts, and memory cannot achieve this. In such instances, this very low-dimensional method of communication is chosen. God can also use language to communicate, but it rarely adopts this method because it is highly dangerous. Because language is prone to misinterpretation, the same sentence can be understood differently by each person. Moreover, even if language is used, you may not necessarily understand it. Look at the Bible. You might not fully comprehend what the scriptures are saying. While it may seem to be in our language on the surface, you can't grasp its inner meaning. Because the meanings that God wishes to express are incredibly complex, it's extremely challenging to describe them using human language. Hence, some scholars expend a lifetime trying to delve into the truths within the Buddhist scriptures or the Bible. Therefore, God said to Neale Donald Walsch that in reality, you shouldn't try to understand God's intentions through scriptures and the Bible. Because whether it's the Bible or the sutras, they are the contents understood by Sakyamuni and involve his ideas, which can't fully express God's intentions. If you wish to understand God or communicate directly with him, you must feel this yourself, without relying on external forces. Where do you go to feel this? It goes back to the same point. You need to sense it in your heart. It is within your body. In fact, the idea of using emotions for communication between God and humans is not too hard to understand. Communication between humans also functions in the same way, with language being the most basic form of communication. The most advanced form of communication is emotional communication. There's no need for words. Our hearts understand each other. Next comes thought communication, followed by memory communication. We have shared experiences. Language is the last. Hence, language is at the lowest tier. For instance, saying I love you verbally doesn't bear much weight. The real I love you is a look, a shared experience, a cherished memory. Inner communication doesn't need words. It has always been wordless, just like love at first sight. One glance gives you immediate understanding, representing the pinnacle of communication. There's no need for words. They pale in comparison. God told Neale Donald Walsch that at best, language can only be considered an auxiliary tool for communication. It doesn't even count as a means. So why do our ways of communicating with God mirror those of human interaction? It boils down to the fact that we are fragments of God. We were supposed to communicate with God's language among each other. But our physical bodies constrained us. Unable to sense each other's emotions, we were forced to invent language to help us communicate. That's how the process unfolded. So what information is written in the Akashic records? What is God trying to convey to us? What is being conveyed around the clock? In reality, the information being conveyed over these 24 hours is all about feelings. God is conveying feelings to us. Why convey feelings? These feelings are neither ours nor God's. So, what are these feelings? In principle, to experience feelings, we can only do so through experience. You can only have respective feelings if you go through it. If you can't experience it, you can only perceive it through imagination. But there are many things that you find hard to imagine. To let us all experience the same feelings, God constantly streams the feelings of others and the world to you, wanting you to experience them to help us understand. Well, this leads us back to a core question. What are we really doing? Why do we need to keep receiving these feelings? This is why we live, the very purpose of life. God said that the reason for living is to feel. By experiencing this world, it lets us discover who we really are. This delves into the question of the truth of this world. God said that initially, there was only one thing in the universe, and that thing is Him. Nothing else existed. The universe is God, and God is the universe. Because the whole universe is God, God didn't know what He is. He was unable to sense His existence. To sense His existence, to know what He is, the only way was to fragment Himself, to break Himself into countless pieces, and understand Himself through mutual observation of these pieces. These countless pieces represent countless souls. Hence, we are fragments of God. We are fragments of the universe, and our lives are meant to help the universe understand itself. For instance, if there's only one taste in the world, the concept of taste would not exist. To understand what a taste is, we must differentiate it into sweet, sour, bitter, spicy, and salty. If they are all mixed together, you will never know what it tastes like. If there's only one emotion in the universe, you wouldn't know what that emotion is. You must separate it, break it into love and hatred, to know what this emotion is. So fundamentally, our existence is for experiencing and feeling the universe, with no other purpose. In other words, in His quest to understand what He is, God shattered Himself, allowing every part of Him to experience this world. Because only by shattering Himself does the divide between inside and outside, you and I, and real feelings come into existence. So, some people are assigned to good experiences or to bad ones. This is not determined by God. God created you, and you are just a fragment of Him. He designed your birth and death, the beginning and end of life. However, He did not design the process in between. The in-between process is designed by you. You can design it in whatever way you wish. But regardless of any design, whether successful or unsuccessful, good or bad, to Him, it's all about the experience. He needs every different experience. Destiny is set at birth, but fortune is not. Fate is your own choice. For those who have had a hard time from the very beginning, it's not by God's design. God said He didn't purposefully design a process of good or bad fortune. He can't feel whether your destiny is good or bad. He needs to sense your destiny, good or bad, through your life journey. He needs some to love and some to hate. Only then can He know what love and hate are. He needs some to live happily and some to live unhappily. Only then will He understand what happiness and unhappiness are. He needs comparison to sense that some are living well and some are not. He needs poverty and wealth, a wealth gap, to experience it. If everyone is the same, he wouldn't have perception. So, he does need some to live unhappy lives and some to make sacrifices. But for God, this sacrifice isn't a sacrifice, it's merely an experience. We are like the lunar rovers that humans have launched to the moon, or the spacecraft sent into the universe. Our function is to gather all the data of this universe. Regardless of whether it's cold, hot, barren, or surrounded by emptiness, we shouldn't feel lonely, fear, cold, or hot. All we need to do is transmit this information. We are like the robot, like the lunar rover. In a sense, you might feel sorry for the lunar rover, alone on the moon. But in fact, for the rover, the feeling of being miserable or not is meaningless. It's solely a data gatherer. Our lives are the same. As long as we feel something, we are performing our task. So, what is the most important thing in life? There is only one thing: to live. Because as long as you are alive, you will have feelings. You can have any kind of feelings that you want, and God does not participate. God said, "I do not plan your life. I am merely an observer, always observing your life, experiencing the world through your body, whether it is good or bad." God granted us the ability to continue creating life forms, which means humans can reproduce and have children. This results in new creatures, and these new creatures can continue to perceive and experience. So, in this place, God also answered the author's initial curses, the rhetorical questions like why it seems God was against him. Actually, he is not. God does not target anyone. He does not participate in anyone's life. He is merely observing our lives. So praying to him is meaningless. Next, Neale Donald Walsch asked God a very crucial question. What happens after humans die? God explained that the experience of the world after death can't be described in human language. So he can't tell you what it's like after death. But in simple terms, after death, everyone will reincarnate. There will be no pain, and there is no such thing as hell. But before reincarnation, you will have a chance to choose what you want to be reincarnated as. It is very similar to a plotline in the Japanese drama Restart Life. An option is given to you. In your next life, you could be a fish, a bug, or possibly a human. You can choose. You could even be an alien. God mentioned that you might not necessarily reincarnate on Earth, but on other planets. He said that there are many environments in the universe like Earth, because he needs to experience the entire universe through these planets. Earth is merely one of these environments. You can choose from these options, then return to this world to live your next life. After all, you are just a sensor. Like when a sensor is being recycled, you can choose which planet you want to go to, and he will send you there. Then Neale Donald Walsch asked if these other planets are the same as Earth. God said they are not. Some planets are more advanced, and some are less advanced. What does it mean to be advanced? What does it mean to be backward? It may not be what you imagine. True advancement is a completely harmonious environment with nature. We see animals as primitive, but in God's eyes, animals are advanced, and humans are backward. Because being advanced means being highly harmonized with nature and not killing each other for possession. In advanced worlds, there is no concept of possession. The concept of possession was invented by humans. In fact, humans cannot own any resources on Earth. You can use everything on Earth and even in the universe, but you cannot own them. Everything has only usage rights. So, from God's perspective, humans are quite foolish. They created a concept of ownership and then began to fight and seize it. Animals will not do this. They will thoroughly enjoy the natural resources. They do not have the desire to keep something for their descendants. And advanced beings fundamentally adhere to the concept of anatta. What is the self? He should not know. He cannot know what he is. Only then can he experience and seek. Your only job in this world is to feel this world, to help God understand this world. There is no other meaning. So, there is no need for you to know what you are. Then, in your next life, you will go to another world to continue experiencing. It's such a cyclical process. Well, today we've discussed just a small part of the content in Conversations with God, but even this little part is highly complex and challenging. As the author himself said, what God truly wants to tell us cannot possibly be conveyed through human language, nor does it need to be. Because deep down, every one of us can feel this high-dimensional information. We need to experience it with our hearts. And one of the most core points is that the only purpose of life is to feel. There is no other purpose to life. Perhaps you have a goal that has not been realized and you feel extremely frustrated. But God tells you that your goal is essentially meaningless to Him. But your deep frustration does have meaning to Him. You can feel extremely dejected. Whether the goal is achieved or not doesn't matter. What matters is your frustration. Therefore, it makes sense that God wouldn't help you achieve this goal. If you want to achieve it, you can only depend on yourself, even if you might have said a lot of blessings to her, even to God. What is a blessing? God says a blessing is actually an acknowledgement of reality. If you bless saying you want something, it means you have not accepted reality because your goal has not been realized. He says such blessings are invalid, and there is only one valid blessing: gratitude. Gratitude means you have already achieved your objective. So whether you pray or worship Buddha, the content of your prayers can only be one kind: gratitude to God for giving me whatever. This is effective. God can feel this kind of prayer, which counts as a kind of emotional transmission to Him. This actually has meaning to Him. Therefore, it is most important to live life diligently and splendidly. We still can't understand what it means for God to exist. Perhaps the God in this book is the same as the God in the 7th-level civilization we've discussed before, and can only be described as existus. Maybe it really takes us humans to go to another world after death to understand what it is like for God to exist. In the future, I hope to understand in more ways what it means for God to exist and to further refine and share God's content with everyone. Through the 2 books, Conversations with God and Outwitting the Devil, whether God and the devil exist and are real is not really what's important. What is more important is how we go on our life journey. That is meaningful. So that's all for the Conversations with God video. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.